Shabbat Shalom. A promising scholar and writer who lived in Jerusalem once described how he first entered a class of budding Kabbalists, mystics who were studying with a great Kabbalist in the old city of Jerusalem. He was thrilled at the privilege of being among this group and looked forward to the great challenge of plumbing the depths of the great Kabbalistic writings under the tutelage of this acclaimed instructor. When the young scholar first entered the room, the sage beckoned him forward. The elderly man took an apple from his drawer and handed it to him. The student accepted the apple with his right hand, nodding his appreciation toward the sage, but perplexed about the meaning of the strange interaction. The sage gently reached out, withdrew the apple, and returned the apple to the drawer. Once again, he opened the drawer, lifted the apple, and presented it to the new student. And again, the student accepted the apple appreciatively, in the same manner as before. And once more, the sage reached out, gently took back the apple, and put it in the drawer. And then, with a very warm smile, the sage demonstrated the manner in which the student was supposed to accept the token gift. He cupped his own hands together and indicated that the student should follow suit. The sage then reached into the drawer, pulled out the apple, and dropped it into the young scholar's open hands. That is how we are to study the Kabbalah, he explained. The word Kabbalah means to receive. We have to make ourselves a receptacle, realizing we have little to give or to add, and that our minds are simply vessels prepared to receive and to absorb this deep and ancient tradition. Imagine coming to a new experience with our hands open, cupped in a gesture of humility, a receptacle for what might be coming. I will admit that for many, many years, really up until this very one, I have used the expression "in the wilderness" as fairly much of a blanket negative. It's useful, it's powerful, and it helps me orient myself when I am in times of great uncertainty, not knowing which way the wind will blow. And though I take some comfort in the expression Bamidbar, in the wilderness, I didn't realize until very recently some of the deep teachings about this notion of in the wilderness that actually are teachings of great humility, great potential, and great positivity. We begin today Bamidbar, in the wilderness. How easy it would have been for our ancestors to go into that wilderness with their fists clenched, their arms crossed over their chests, afraid of what was coming to them. But instead, our sages developed a way of thinking about it to suggest that when we go into a wilderness of something brand new, we should come with our hands open, like the young scholar. This is based on a midrash called Bamidbar Rabbah, Additional Rabbinic Teachings, based on the book of Numbers, or In the Wilderness, where our sages ask, looking at the first verse of this fourth book of the Torah, Hashem spoke to Moses in the wilderness of Sinai. Why in the wilderness of Sinai? The sages teach that the Torah was given with three elements: with fire, with water, and in the wilderness. With fire, where is that derived? We read in Exodus, Mount Sinai was all in smoke because the Eternal had descended upon it in fire. Exodus 19:18. In water, from where is that derived? As we read in Judges, in the Song of Deborah, chapter 5, verse 4, indeed, when God spoke to the people, the heavens dripped, indeed, the clouds dripped water. And in the wilderness, from where is this idea derived? Because the Eternal spoke to Moses in the wilderness of Sinai. Why was it given with these three elements, they ask? It is that just as these, fire, water, and the wilderness, are free for all mankind, so matters of Torah are free, as it is stated in Isaiah, ho, everyone who is thirsty, go to water. And davar acher, another matter, the sages teach that God spoke to Moses in the wilderness of Sinai because anyone who does not render himself like a wilderness, accessible to all, will not be able to acquire wisdom and the Torah. And that is why we begin this section of our Torah with, in the wilderness of Sinai. So the key phrase here is, all who must render themselves like a wilderness, and who can do so, will be able to acquire wisdom and the Torah. How do we make ourselves like a wilderness? For so long, I would have thought that was something not to be desired, a goal not to be reached. But in fact, in order to fully absorb these teachings and connect to the Torah, our sages say we must not only be as though we are in a wilderness, but we actually even have to become the wilderness. Visualizations and meditations can be very powerful in creating a sense of emptiness, of stillness, of a place within where we can be open and free to all manner of thinking, of ideas, of people. That way we come with our hands open and not closed. This is a powerful teaching, not an easy one to incorporate. So much in our society says that we should be closed, strong, ego-bound. The wording of the Midrash says we actually have to become not just a wilderness, but actually a really wonderful word, hefker. Hefker means ownerless. It's a very strange concept, and it's a wonderful one that the Talmudic rabbis have many field days discussing when an object or an animal becomes ownerless and what happens with it. But there's a connection between being ownerless and gaining access to wisdom and Torah. The notion of becoming ownerless is intriguing and alluring. I really loved the teachings of Rabbi Jordan Brownig for Hebrew College on this particular subject. He suggests we are laid claim to, owned, constantly. It's not always bad, but we are laid claim to by friends and family, by work and obligations, by technology, and our own drive towards success. Far from a no man's land, we often feel more like a piece of real estate in a hot market, being fought over and bid on by all the competing forces in our lives. Wouldn't it be a relief, just once in a while, to be ownerless? To exist like some untouched backcountry? Imagine the insights that could be gained, the understandings that could surface, if we could just embody the tranquility and stillness of a desert landscape. Now, let's be honest. The desert is not a still and tranquil place. Right? The desert is like an ocean with its life underground. I misquote an old song. But there is so much vitality and excitement and danger in a desert. And yet, Seen this way, the wilderness is no longer an obstacle standing in our way, but this place of infinite possibility, a model for living that, as John Muir, a complicated legacy that he left, but to the great American naturalist once promised, offers us the clearest way into the universe. The Hasidic masters loved this midrash about becoming a wilderness in order to receive Torah. For the Sfat Emet, the 19th century mystic and Rebbe of the Ger Hasidim, the notion of making oneself hefker, ownerless, was all about humility, quieting down the ego and renouncing our own hyper-rational and critical lenses. To be like the Midbar, in the desert, in the wilderness, is to come into contact with the Torah and be shaped by it, to bend ourselves to the will of the transcendent. When we can encounter wisdom, as the author of Proverbs begs us to do, from the vantage point of the Midbar, the wilderness, means relinquishing our role as subject and seeing for a little while, maybe each day or once a week, maybe even a little more often, seeing what it feels like to be the wild and unmappable object. It's no secret that each of us has deep, unexplored places within us. We have regions that are tangled and treacherous and hard to navigate, but they are rich with revelatory wisdom. The wilderness will provide the setting for the rest of our Torah, and it is possible for us to read that desert wandering as the fulfillment of a curse, as though God were saying, here's what you get for doubting me, for letting your fears get the best of you. And that will come to light as we go on our way in the book of Numbers and read the episode of the spies. But our legacy as wilderness walkers can also be seen as a great gift. We know what it is to amble aimlessly, to come back to the same places and the same challenges and the same conflicts over and over again, to be stuck, but then, as our ancestors did, dust themselves off and keep going. We know as a Jewish people what it means to set our eyes on an untamed landscape full of life and mystery and possibility, and to see ourselves in it. And then, instead of coming with closed fists, open hands, hold on to one another, and keep going forward. May we each be, in the best sense of the word, like a wilderness, open to possibility on all sides, and yet subject to wonderful discoveries. May there be shalom in our world. Shabbat shalom.